Hello, folks. This is Michael Emery with the Voice of Idaho, bringing you an episode where we challenge the media, we to what they're reporting on, and what our findings are within the truth, with source documented facts. And today, who we have with us is Jeff Wright. He has a book out there called Citizen's Last Stand. You can find that on Amazon or even on our website. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Good afternoon, Michael. How are you today?
Doing well. We've had an interesting last few weeks now, haven't we?
Oh, that's true. Yes, particularly when it comes to what's going on with Benghazi and the Hillary scam and all the other stuff out there on that subject.
It seems to all be coming together from what I'm seeing. You know, the internet has done a fantastic job of vetting the sources of information to the bare bones of what it really is and not some propaganda or spin. And that's what I'm seeing. Whether it's in Russia and Putin talking or anything else, I got to say that Russia seems to be coming forward in a more benevolent light than anyone else.
Well, yeah, I think they realized that the United States has created a complete power vacuum across the Middle East through a series of several administrations implementing terrible policy, foreign policy and defense policy across the region. And I think Putin's realized that in several locations he has no trouble or no other option but to step up and to insert Russia into the mix if we're going to try and stabilize the region at all.
Well, I seen him on the reports when he was talking to Obama and different things, and one of the things he mentioned was the truth and reality of these contractors running around with. He said they're paid contractors. They go to the highest bidder, and then he informed constituents within the United States that he knows how much they're being paid. I think that's a pretty broad statement, don't you?
Well, I think it's indicative of a problem that the previous and current administration in the U.S. have created in the region by using so many paid contractors as mercenaries across the region, and in a manner that allows them to insert themselves directly into the situations and creates some potential foreign policy, everything from potential foreign policy to debacle to potential hostage situation to what we've seen in Afghanistan and elsewhere, where contractors are actually involved in incidents in killing civilians and others as contract mercenaries being paid for by the United States government.
Well, you know, one of the other things that I've seen him talking about, and that's something that we're going to review here pretty soon with Senator, isn't it Senator Risch? You know, they were talking about millions of dollars paid that's supposed to be going against ISIS, and there was like only 4 people in open congressional session that they reported that they're actually part of it after the millions of dollars. Can you kind of clear the air to that, Jeff? Do you know anything about that?
Well, what they're talking about is the program where the U.S. was going to support and train what were termed rebel insurgents in Syria and for use elsewhere in military and black ops tactics in order to do our bidding and to keep our own boots on the ground out of the region. That's had 2 things happen to it. Number one, it's been extremely inefficient in that we've spent upwards of tens of millions of dollars and actually only wound up training. We allocated $500 million. We've spent some published figures say as much as 50 to 60 million, and we have a total of 4 to 5 trained rebel insurgents now. In fact, 2 of them I think have already been captured.
Yeah, well, I mean that's almost a point of idiocracy, if you ask me. I mean, my God.
Well, there's obviously not much bang for the buck there, to use a phrase. But I mean, it's just been a terribly implemented and managed program. It's creating more problems than it's worth, and it's virtually useless at doing anything for us. It's just a huge waste of money and resources and time, and it perpetuates the real problem, which is it inserts the U.S. At the ground level, engaged in operations where we have no direct control over, yet we pick up all the blame for when innocent civilians get killed, just like in drone attacks gone awry. And we term in the things that we term collateral damage. And at some point, leaders in the United States need to realize that if we keep this up, we are actually creating more hard feelings and more bad will against the United States than we're ever going to help. And we're not fixing anything while we're at it. We're breaking more things as we go.
Well, you know, we've got Senator Risch with the House Intelligence Committee. It got on Wolf Blitzer's show talking about some of these things. And I see that from what I'm seeing is just an absolute disconnection to reality. And folks, we're going to go ahead and we're going to play what Senator Risch said to Blitzer about Obama and Putin's talk. And we're going to get your comments on that. So I'm going to go ahead and play that for you, okay, Jeff? And I'm going to stop it at a certain point. Maybe you can help me on the stop to comment, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Let's bring in a leading member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Intelligence Committees, Republican Senator James Risch of Idaho. Senator, thanks very much for coming in. What are you hearing? Could Russia strike at any time?
Well, they could strike at any time. I think the analysis that was just done was clear and concise and to the point. Although I would say that Putin does not need Assad. He needs Syria. And if Assad's still in power in Syria, so be it. He'll work with Assad. But if indeed he sees that Assad is not who's going to stand up in the country, then he'll go a different direction, and it won't bother him at all. He needs Syria.
You heard the data.
What do you think about that statement there, Jeff?
I think right off the bat, I said that this is indicative of exactly where the neoconservative authoritarian war hawks have gone totally off the rails in the Middle East. The first thing he's trying to say is that, and the first mistake made both by the conservative and the liberal war hawks out there in this administration was thinking that we could, for the third time, we could yet remove one more strongman from a stable country in the region and not create a whole lot of problems. What he's saying is he's first trying to support, the Russians are first trying to support Assad. Well, absolutely. The last thing that anybody should want to happen in the region is to lose one more strongman, one more stable government. Sure, what Assad is doing, just like what Gaddafi is doing, just like what Saddam Hussein was doing, it hurts. It was hurting a percentage of his own people right now. And their case was that these strongmen that we have, they're hurting their own populations and causing some big. Well, let's look at Saddam Hussein in that respect before we come back to Assad and Syria.
Okay.
In the whole history of his domination and authoritarian governance over his own people, he had caused a couple 100,000, the deaths of a couple 100,000 people in his country. Well, since we began our invasion in Iraq, and when we initiated both the cleansing operation and allowed the civil war to proceed without much intercession on our own part until it started to backfire on us completely, plus our own direct action in invading and taking over the country, by various estimates, we probably caused the death by going into Iraq of somewhere between 300 and 800,000 civilians, and I've seen estimates by some organizations, world organizations, saying that it may have been over 1 million people in Iraq were killed directly through our actions. Well, the majority of those people were innocent bystanders. They were not participants in the war. And so when you look at the fact that you know, it was a terrible thing that Saddam Hussein caused 200,000 deaths in trying to maintain dominant iron fist over his own country. But we killed as many as 800,000 to a million in supposedly fixing the problem. And that doesn't even count, you know, breaking it when we, as Colin Powell said, if you break it, you own it. Well, that doesn't count all the breakage that we did that still to this day. Does anybody out there actually believe there'd be an ISIS or an ISIL if we hadn't invaded Iraq? Well, obviously no, there wouldn't be. Well, if we take out one more strongman and finish destabilizing the region, that's going to cause the deaths of another hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in the region. So who's going to be responsible for that? Our policy from the beginning against Assad was ill-conceived and ill-run. We should have never drawn the red line, or if we drew the red line, we should have pursued it, which we didn't do that. And one way or another, Putin's actions were the only responsible actions at this point that have taken place with regard to Syria. First thing they're going to try and do is stabilize the existing government so it doesn't fall apart. And yeah, if they can't stabilize the government that falls apart, well, obviously they broke it, they own it. They're going to have to come in and try and return stability to Syria somehow.
Okay.
But the fact is that the only reason that it happened is because we broke it. We're the ones that supported the rebels. We're the ones that armed the rebels to a large degree, and we did the same thing and allowed Libya to fall apart in the same manner, which now is descending into chaos as well. None of these things are helping us, and what Senator Risch is indicating was simply objective reality that Russia perceived had to be accomplished that the United States had failed in both in the policies of the right and the policies of the left.
Well, listen to what Blitzer had to say on this response.
Supreme Allied Commander Philip Breedlove say that the Russians are putting equipment there in Syria right now. Equipment you don't need to fight ISIS. Air-to-air defenses, for example, surface-to-air missile batteries. ISIS doesn't have warplanes. They're doing something there that has other objectives.
Well, I think
Real quick, what is your response on that there, Jeff, on what Blitzer said?
Yeah, well, I didn't hear. I was having trouble hearing part of what he was saying. Well,
let's try it again. I'll go back to it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do a mark on this. All right, so I can spike it. Let's see. I'll turn it up.
Say that the Russians are putting.
Syria.
You heard the NATO Supreme Allied Commander Philip Breedlove say that the Russians are putting equipment there in Syria right now. Equipment you don't need to fight ISIS. Air-to-air defenses, for example, surface-to-air missile batteries. ISIS doesn't have warplanes. They're doing something there that has other objectives.
Well, I think.
Right. Okay. I got it now. What he's saying is exactly what I said. Is the first thing that the Russians are doing, and what they're putting there is they're going to fight not only the ISIS elements, but they're going to fight the insurgent elements against the government, against the South government, because the purpose is to leave the existing government in place, not to allow it to fall apart. If it falls apart, everything falls apart. So their strategy obviously is to first protect the Assad government, which is exactly what I said earlier, and second, to then go after the ISIS elements that are within Syria. Either one of them, and at any time, the other part of that is that even what are quote unquote the moderate rebels that everybody hates that we're attacking. Well, you know, all the ones that are now working for ISIS, they used to be, when we started arming them, they were the moderate rebels as well.
Right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and continue. You break in when you want to. I'm going to let it roll just a little bit. so we can kind of get some of this down.
I think maybe they're planning for the second step. There's another school of thought that they think that Assad is not going to survive very long, and they want to be there to take advantage of the situation. Here's the problem for them, Wolf. If Assad goes, it is very, very hard to game out where this thing goes, because there'll be a vacuum, as there always is in these kinds of situations. There's already chaos with all the different groups and all the different tribal connections and religious and ethnic groups there in Syria. And how this all shakes out afterwards is very difficult. And where do the Russians land in this? Do they land as being a player in it or not?
Senator, we have more to discuss, including this.
Hang on right there.
Okay.
Well, obviously, I mean that's one thing that Senator Risch has gotten right, is that if Assad falls, yeah, it's going to be more difficult to game out. But the first thing that the Russians need to do, and that contradicts his own point.
It does, doesn't it?
Or confirms Putin's point that the first goal has to be to maintain Assad in government in that position, because it becomes, as Senator Risch said, it becomes extremely hard to game out if you lose Assad, because now you don't have any stable government in Syria whatsoever, and you're going to wind up in exactly the same situation we wound up in Iraq, where you now have all the contingent rebel factions that start fighting with each other, and the whole situation descends into total chaos. So if you listen to what he's saying, he's actually first contradicting his own point and confirming the point that both Putin is saying and what I'm saying, is that what the Russians are doing is exactly what needs to be done, which is stabilize first and make sure that the Assad government does not fall.
Well, what's really kind of a catch-22 here is a lot of those forces that Russia will be going up against and fighting are the very ones that seems to me that we've aided and supported. And here's another thing. If we really were after terrorists, what about Saudi Arabia, where a lot of these high-end commanders come from?
Well, you don't even go there, Michael, because now you're opening up all the way back to the original can of worms that was opened up on 9/11, and that is why when 18 of the 19 terrorists were Saudis, why did we attack Iraq at all? And why did we attack Afghanistan at all?
The only can of worms that I'm talking about on this is that the insanity of direction for whom we were supposedly fighting, and it's just become a quagmire of it, But anyways, I'll go ahead and finish this up here on this.
Homeland Security report. It's pretty shocking, eye-opening. No U.S. strategy in dealing with these foreign fighters who are traveling back and forth between Syria and the United States. Much more with James Risch when we come back. We're back with Senator James Risch. He's a top member of the Foreign Relations and Intelligence Committees. Senator, we're learning more about what these jihadists do. American citizens, this new report that just came out, final report of the Task Force Combating Terrorist and Foreign Fighter Travel, put up by the Homeland Security Committee in the House. They go over there, maybe 250 Americans. Some of them are now back here in the United States.
That's right.
Is the U.S. law enforcement community all over them? Do they know these people, who these people are, or have they just melted away?
Well, Wolf, I can't really talk about the details of this, but you can well imagine that anybody who's traveled to Syria, and particularly where they have determined that they have fought with ISIS, those people are of deep, deep interest to the United States government and our security agencies. So there are...
Hold it right there, Michael.
Okay.
What would be really nice for Senator Risch to be a deep, deep concern was what happened to all the hundreds of Stinger missiles that went through the Benghazi compound that they lost control of in the attack, prior to and in the attack, and all the other small arms, that all of those potential returnees coming back could be bringing with them. Nobody seems to bring that up ever at all in any of these discussions as to what happened to all the arms that we are arming the Syrian rebels with, and particularly all the hundreds of Stinger missiles. I mean, if you want to talk about a scary scenario coming back into the U.S., think about these jihadists coming back into the U.S. with Stinger missiles that are smuggled in that they can use around any airport in any city in the United States. If they don't seem to care about that, They don't seem to want to get to the bottom of Benghazi. They've been sitting there on their thumbs for 3 years with the Benghazi committee doing nothing in the Senate and out of Senator Risch's committee. You know, we've asked multiple times from TVOI for the Risch's office to respond to what happened to the communications archive, to what happened to the arms and weapons, to what happened that night, and why, and who was in the loop, and who understood what went down September 11, 2012 in Benghazi, and what happened to all those Stinger missiles.
Yeah, we have time and time again. You did this a year before we even started submitting questions to him, and it's nothing but silence from him. I get information from police officers that I know that over 9/11 just recently, that there was a security alert, be on the lookout for those very weapons being used against civilian aircraft. So what is the problem with bringing this up? Well,
the reason he says he doesn't want to talk about it because it's not because it's classified. It's because if you start talking about any of it, you start getting into the subjects that we just brought up, which is why they haven't ever gotten to the bottom of Benghazi. Who was responsible for it, both Republicans and Democrats in the administration, and what they're currently doing now to try and protect Americans instead of trying to misdirect the whole issue and misinform the Americans about what actually has been going on in the Middle East and in the various agencies of government for the last 3 or 4 years.
You know, we sit here and people fly that we care about on these aircraft across the United States, maybe even throughout the world, and they say that they're worried about maybe liabilities or something. What about the liability of those lives of our families on those aircraft? And what kind of responsibility do they have for national security? I don't think that there's anything more higher on the national security level than this. And they want to give us lip service. I find that offensive, Jeff. I find that very offensive.
It's been offensive. What's most offensive is the fact that not any of these congressional representatives or senators will answer up for any of the questions that we've been asking surrounding the nature of these issues. They won't answer any of these. They won't even acknowledge that they're receiving them yet. Yet they go out on the press and they misdirect this discussion all the time away from exactly what we're talking about here and exactly what should be concerning them the highest, which is the safety and security of American lives, which they pay lip service to all the time. But then when it comes to actually doing anything about it, we find out, oh, gee, they've fallen down on the job all over the place.
I have to sit here. I've worked a little investigation, a few other things, but I got to sit back, and I've been silent for a long time. But Senator Risch and the rest of you folks out there, you know, what is it that you're not that incompetent? So is it that they will be liable themselves? I mean, this is in an investigation. When people act like this, sometimes it's because they have vested interest in it that they don't want discovered. And I'm coming to the point where I think that is the case.
Well, this is certainly where you would tend to go. Your reasoning would tend to go when they refuse to answer any questions or to even acknowledge that the questions exist. When the questions are proven time and time again, all the questions that TVOI News and Tosh Plumley and some of the other whistleblowers and people that are out there exposing this malfeasance, they've come up with tremendously legitimate questions, and yet everybody involved seems to want to avert their eyes, look away, misdirect the discussion, and not answer anything with regard to what the real issues are in each of these circumstances.
And not to mention all the evidence that was brought forth with Trey Gowdy's investigation in open congressional session, which, I mean, even with the TK security clearance violations of Hillary Clinton, she shouldn't even have a clearance now. Everything that we look at is like they've been caught, I mean, literally, and they're just continuing on like business as usual. So what is the U.S. citizens to do, Jeff? What should we do sitting back here with such monstrosity of evidence in front of us?
Well, the first thing I should do is be extremely outraged by the
I am
complete lack of action on the part of their congressional representatives and senators to one, bring an obviously treasonous and criminal Hillary Clinton first to impeachment and then to trial and indictment in open court. Because believe me, having been a holder of a top secret TK access level clearance, I can tell you, if I had done even a tenth of the things that Hillary Clinton has done, I would be in jail today, probably for 20 to 40 years, or if not life.
You may have gotten a firing squad even, who knows?
I mean, but she seems to be getting a complete pass, and yet the citizens out there, they either don't realize this, or they're simply too complacent to act. But the first thing they need to be doing is they need to be getting on the phone to their congressional representatives in the House and the Senate and excoriating them up one side and down the other to take action, to investigate, to complete the investigation, to determine where the crimes are, and to make sure that the Justice Department indicts for those, develops and indicts for those crimes, legitimate crimes that have been perpetrated by these criminals that we have in our own government who are not protecting the United States. And it doesn't, and it shouldn't, and it never matter. It should never matter how far this goes. If there's Republicans involved, if there's Democrats involved, administration officials, agency officials, it doesn't matter at this point. The crimes that have been perpetrated on the American people, or the failure to follow their oath or to maintain and protect the people of the United States, those crimes need to be prosecuted, and it doesn't matter who's done it, what their level of office is, they need to be prosecuted, and we need to put the United States back on a footing where we have integrity on our government. We're reaching in this a constitutional crisis by the lack of integrity, and it's going to be in pursuing and prosecuting and upholding the law in the federal government. I mean, if any of the citizens did anything close to this, we'd all be in jail. Yet these people go free every day.
Well, I'd like to help the folks out. We have presented certain questions to Risch's office, Labrador's office, Crapo's office, and Simpson's office. And we get some form letter from Simpson's office. But I think that we should concentrate on one person, and that's Risch. And so, folks, when you watch this video, look down in our comment sections. We will have the who to contact, email, everything else, and the questions to be asked. Or you can go to our news agency, TVOI News, the Voice of Idaho. And if you really want to help your country, it's time for you to get off your chairs and ask these questions and demand an answer, because they work for us, not the other way around. And if it means somebody of a high order goes to jail, so be it. We're going to go ahead and listen to the rest of this, okay, Jeff? And break in anywhere you feel necessary.
Sure.
Okay.
Point out, and as the report points out, a number of them that have come back. And when you're doing this kind of thing, and you're doing the kind of look at that needs to be done with these people, it does strain resources. There's no question about it. It is a top priority.
I understand that, but are all of them under surveillance? Are any of them out there and about, ready to do whatever they want?
You know, the numbers are classified, but again, as you can well imagine, it's difficult to keep every single one of them keep track of.
Okay.
All the
I'm sorry.
You know, I mean, you listen to all the contradictions that go on in his responses. It's just incredible. The numbers are classified. What do you mean? He gave the numbers. He gave the numbers right at the beginning.
He did. That's why I'm laughing.
Okay. I mean,
well, the numbers are classified, but
and what's classified? This is a game Senator Risch and his staff have played with me for more than a year and a half. When I bring up any of these questions, is that well, that's all classified. We can't discuss this. No, you can't discuss methods and procedures. You can't discuss actually substantive intelligence. But you can talk about processes, and you can talk about the process of and the information revolving around what are we doing with regard to, are we subpoenaing this information from the White House to obtain the communications or the communications archive of what went down that night in Benghazi?
Good point.
Are we aware of what actual Homeland Security operations are involved in tracking these returning jihadists? Do we have any? What is it that we're doing? You don't disclose methods and practices. You don't disclose specific substantive intelligence, but you do disclose what the status is of what you're doing, of whether you're actually aware of what's happening on the ground or whether you're not. And all he's doing all he seems to be doing all the time is misdirecting people. He's trying to misdirect your attention, say, look over here, okay, so we don't have to answer up for what's not happening, what actions we're not taking over on this subject.
Well, that's what in an investigation someone does when they are trying to hide or cover up something that may have implications to them. And I gotta say, we're with a sound foundation that everything that he seems to be doing right now is to just ossificate the information, to push it to the side for a benefit to the very ones that seem to have committed the crimes. I don't know where he stands within that chain of command within that, but I'm beside myself with this insanity. I don't under.
Well, yeah, that's why as the months go by, the only thing I can come to is that he is covering up something, because the only thing he ever seems to answer up is he either misdirects the question or he says, well, it's classified and we can't discuss it.
Well, on the Stinger missiles situation alone, with national security at stake, not political gain, that right there says everything I need to know. That speaks volumes. And it seems to be not a consideration or even a response to a legitimate news agency such as the Voice of Idaho and many others across this nation. My God.
The problem we really have is that none of the mainstream media are asking any of these questions, and I think that's the general underlying premise here of all the responses that we seem to be getting out of our politicians and agency officials these days is that they know that the mainstream media is so dumbed down that they don't even answer any of these. They don't even ask any of these questions.
Well, that's the press corps. That's the press corps. It's supposed to be the legitimate media, and they keep a stronghold on good reporters. There's been many. Look at Judge Janine. She's put him out there. Judge Jenny, I guess her name is, on Fox News. There's been many people on mainstream that have pressed some of these questions that I've seen, and nothing's happened because the mainstream media within the news reporting that they, like Blitzer, them kind of guys, they're the talking points. Okay, whatever, Anyways.
Okay, so let's go back to listening in here.
Okay.
Time and for that matter, anytime.
Because I read this report, and that's a worrisome part of this.
It is. It's
potentially there's not enough law enforcement or whatever to get the job done. It also says this, and here's a damning indictment. It says the U.S. lacks a national strategy for combating terrorist travel and has not produced one in nearly a decade.
That's true. We have pressed the administration on that particular issue.
But Congress has a role in this as well.
Well, we do, but that kind of thing is part of the exec. We give money to the administration, and they are supposed to oversee it and develop the strategies for that.
Well, hang on right there again, right? And they glossed right over it. He said for more than a decade they haven't had a policy. Okay, and this is exactly the point: is that it doesn't matter whether it's the left or the right. We haven't had a policy. We don't have a policy today, and we don't have action being taken. And it seems to be that both sides of the aisle seem to have a vested interest in either not having a policy or not answering up for a policy, nor to take any action. What they seem to have a vested interest in is simply covering their own butts and not worrying so much about the true national security of the people of the United States.
So what do we pay our taxes for then?
Yeah, well, taxes and more debt. That's what we've got handed.
Yeah, well, I think that maybe Washington need to be fired.
Yeah, we need to. That's why we do need to clean house on both sides of the aisle. And until we clean house, we're not going to fix this problem because of the embedded nature of the problem.
I can't see a difference between Republican and Democrats these days and ages, but
They've become less and less distinctive with each election cycle.
they just, yeah. Well, let's go on with what they has to say, and let's find out some more.
Help them with
Has the power
laws.
of the purse.
Right, we will help.
You can fund a strategy too, right?
That's absolutely correct, and this strategy is very important because, as you point out, just one of these people getting lost within the population is a serious problem that can cause difficulty.
The so-called train and equip program to train moderates in Syria to go out there and fight ISIS, and the U.S. appropriated about $500 million, maybe $50 million already spent, and for that, the U.S. got 4 or 5 rebels who are now fighting ISIS. What a waste of money.
Incredible waste of money, and there were a lot of us right at the outset that were very, very reluctant to grant that authority, if you would, or think that it had any chance of success.
Oh, really?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Reluctant. I wonder if you go back and look over the voting record as these measures were moving through the House, how many times our congressional delegation voted to push this funding through. I don't think that. I mean, the idea that they don't have trying to remove culpability and just point to the administration. This problem is pervaded through both Republican and Democratic administrations, Democratic and Republican Congresses. I mean, going back to the Iraq War, where you have Democrats and Republicans voting on invading Iraq, which created this whole problem. And the people that were in Congress then, that are still in Congress today, that voted for these things. This idea that when you're talking to Republicans, that they're always going to try and indirectly. I mean, he's very clever, really, in the way he's trying to direct the fault away and the blame away from Republicans, like they didn't vote on any of these appropriations to train these moderate terrorists, as they call them. I saw there's a really funny cartoon out there that has a picture of a terrorist in camouflage and all dressed up and loaded down with his weapons. There's 2 terrorists. The one on the left, right, is called a moderate terrorist. Well, that one has a U.S. flag in his hand. And then on the other side is a regular terrorist that looks exactly the same, but just doesn't have a U.S. flag in his hand.
It's amazing. I maybe we should just laugh at them. I mean, it's so off base and so obvious. We should just laugh at them because it doesn't seem that anything they say is based on any type of reality.
No, their credibility, the credibility of the Senator Risch and others is in my mind, is gone. They've lost all credibility to have any credibility whatsoever. And worse yet, because of where he sits on the Intelligence Committee, it's pretty obvious that he has direct knowledge, and he probably is in the decision loop somewhere. If we could just get at the information, and I think that's why we don't ever get at the information, because we then see who in the House and Senate leadership was involved in making all of these decisions that brought about all of these blowback problems that we now have. And the American people would start to realize just how that we have a complete collapsing leadership structure that is in the process of allowing the United States national security to go straight to hell in a handbasket and to send us into a constitutional crisis. And they refuse to admit responsibility, and they refuse to allow us the transparency to understand exactly what's happened so that we can discipline those that are responsible by kicking them out of office if they haven't performed under their oath or their job, by protecting the people of the United States and our defense and national security, or sending them in for criminal indictment for the crimes that they've actually committed.
Well, you've mentioned some of this in your story, Citizens Last Stand. I highly encourage anyone that wants to get a breath of what's going on from somebody that had a crystal ball years ago talking about this to go get that book, Citizen's Last Stand. It will arm you to the teeth with knowledge. Let's go back to what else he has to say, because this is almost a Comedy Central routine at this point.
The problem is the complexity of the ground in Syria. These people really want to fight Assad much more than they want to fight ISIS. So it's difficult to train them and do all these things and say, okay, now go fight ISIS.
So who's going to lead the fight against ISIS in Syria?
Well, obviously.
I'm sorry.
Did you see how he turned right around and tried to defend the program by saying it's so complex, and that's the reason that we were having so much difficulty getting these. Okay, first he tries to run down the program, then turns right around and tries to defend the program by saying how complex it is on the ground and how difficult it is to train and arm these people and get them to go off and fight ISIL when all they want to do is fight Assad. As you're saying, it's almost like a comedy at this point.
It's like a bad Twilight Zone movie that's got a. I'm at this point just astounded with all the information that's out there, that's vetted and sourced, irrefutable, and then someone like Senator Risch gets up here and speaks this garbage.
Well, it's embarrassing to the point of criminality.
Right? What do you do when you get somebody that's caught red-handed and they still deny? This is where we're at. It's just like they're caught, but they're just going along with the program.
Well, that's why they jump from point to point to point and contradict themselves literally within the next sentence.
Well, the citizens of the United States are what runs this nation. And the people that are listening to us that work within the system, you have a job and a duty to do for the future children of this nation and this world. And it's more important than the dollars that you get or maybe your careers. At this point of the game, we have no future if we don't get to the bottom of this. And
well, that's exactly true. That is the real problem here. If we don't have, Michael and Jeff sitting here all day long pointing out the inaccuracies, the misdirection, the outright lies of these politicians and people in their public statements. We could do this all day long, but if the bulk of the citizens don't start moving in reaction to the actions of these politicians and to discipline them, to put them out of office, to criminally indict them for their criminal acts, they have no one to blame but themselves.
Well, there's many people that are challenging them, and we're here to give them a voice, and that's what we're here to do. Folks, get off your seats and do something about it before it's too late, okay? Because they're trying. You'll hear a little bit later in this what he's talking about, or what threat Putin may have, and I'm going to go ahead and play some more of this. You stop me in any given time, okay, Jeff?
To have any success at all, it's going to need to be Syrians do that. It can't be foreigners.
But they're not ready to do it, apparently.
Some are, most aren't. The vast majority.
4 or 5 rebels?
Yeah.
That's not a whole lot. So here's the question. Russia. Can Russia be helpful to the United States in fighting ISIS, even though it supports Bashar al-Assad's regime?
The answer to that is yes. Will it? That remains to be seen. We have differences, in fact, deep differences with Russia on a lot of fronts. But it's not a secret that we do work with other governments, even ones we have issues with. A good example you recall on the Boston bombers. There was an exchange of information on the Boston bombers. Now, it wasn't enough and it wasn't good enough what came to us, but nonetheless, the agencies were working together when you have a common interest. We have a common interest with Russia. Indeed, we have a common interest with everyone in the world. There's nobody wants ISIS to prevail other than ISIS itself.
So you could see the U.S. working with Russia to fight ISIS. Could you see the U.S. working with Iran, which also opposes ISIS?
Well, I can see that. Again, a little bit more difficult situation. But look,
right there. Yeah, isn't that interesting that all of a sudden he recognizes and understands the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And if you spend the entire amount of your time, as the neoconservatives do, demonizing other countries and other peoples all the time, it sounds a little bit more than a little bit hypocritical when all of a sudden you turn around and say, oh, well, sure, we can work with these people when we have common interests. But other than that, they're totally the devil. They're totally the Antichrist, and we can't work with them in any fashion whatsoever. But now all of a sudden we can. I mean, it is comical to listen to the way that certain politicals step all over themselves trying to recognize common sense. And the fact is that maybe the way that they try and run the foreign policy to dominate in every way, in every fashion, is perhaps not the way that this nation was set up to function. And at some point, it would behoove both the progressive war hawks on the left and the neoconservative war hawks and authoritarians on the right to come out of their bubbles and recognize that the world that we live in is a lot more complex than the simple statements they want to make in front of the public all the time. And then when they get trapped, they make the right statement, but then they immediately start to back away from it because they don't want to be accused of supporting Iran in any endeavor whatsoever, because they've spent a career making them into the devil.
And they spent a career in a bubble where the world didn't have a camera and a mic everywhere,
Right.
and they can't escape it now. They're still playing the game of the 80s.
Well, that's true. This is all, what Risch is really trying to figure out how to thread the needle is all of the remnant Cold War thinking that still pervades in so much of the establishment Republican Party against the political realities that face us every day in the complex world that we live in. They want to try and put things in simple boxes, yet those simple boxes they try and place them in get them in real trouble when they have to deal with the actual political realities of every day in living in the globe and dealing with our both our allies and our adversaries.
They don't own the voice anymore. The people of this world own the voice. Now let's go ahead and listen to a little bit more of his.
When you're trying to accomplish beating a foe like ISIS, you do what you have to do and team up where you have to team up to do some good. Like I said, there's nobody that wants to see ISIS prevail. The Russians, certainly, they've got all kinds of issues with their own terrorists at home. They've got the Chechenian territory that they have to deal with. The Iranians, they view themselves as the leader of the jihad, not ISIS. So they're dedicated to eliminate ISIS also.
There's an alarming report in the UK's Daily Express, a journalist supposedly embedded with ISIS saying they are trying, ISIS, to get a hold of a nuclear weapon to kill hundreds of millions of people, potentially. Here's the question. How concerned are you that ISIS could get its hands on a nuclear weapon?
Well, I'm probably not as concerned that they would get their hands on an actual nuclear weapon. They could get material where they could make a dirty bomb. More importantly than that, they could much more easily get their hands on biological or chemical material, which could be very disruptive. And
What about Stinger missiles?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to let him get through the whole thing and say, well,
very damaging.
what about the Stinger missiles they acquired through the Benghazi Annex? Is there any care about that?
Let's repeat that so everybody can hear it, because this is real important. Okay.
Well, I'm probably not as concerned that they would get their hands on an actual nuclear weapon. They could get material where they could make a dirty bomb. More importantly than that, they could much more easily get their hands on biological or chemical material, which could be very disruptive and very damaging. A nuclear weapon itself, is it possible? Yes, it's possible, but you don't go down to the arms store and just buy a nuclear weapon off the shelf. But these other things that you can get your hands on.
Senator Risch, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay. So they can go down. They can't get that, but they can get conventional weapons. Oh, well, we've just happened to help them out and save them thousands, if not millions of dollars by producing this information and giving it to them and helping them within their investigation. So wouldn't you say that would be accurate, Jeff?
Well, you know, the interesting thing is that here we're 3 years into after the Benghazi incident, and we can't really get down to the first answer of who was truly responsible, who was involved, who was truly responsible, what caused the actual event to begin with, why were the military elements told to stand down, who told them to stand down, you know, the whole who knew what, when, how, and why has been so cleverly obscured for more than 3 years now with no answers. And it'll be interesting to find out at the congressional hearings coming up with Hillary Clinton as to what questions get asked and answered on Benghazi that night to determine what actually went down and who was responsible. Because it's interesting is all the intel and all of the actual information of what went down is in the government's hands.
It's in the public's hand by CNN and stuff, and by open congressional sessions with interviews that Craig Gowdy's had in a monstrosity of a level. I mean, it's so in our face with the evidence at hand, but we're waiting for their official response. And that's where I have a problem. I mean, it'd be different if I wasn't witnessing to this information myself. But go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, yeah, that's you're correct. Is that, but what's amazing is that they've managed to delay this and misdirect it for 3 years now, so we still don't have a good idea at all of what went down. Yet they do have all the information in their hands, but they just don't want it released because of because of all of the hands that were involved in Congress, in the National Security Council, in the White House, in the Defense Department, all the hands that were involved in actually what went down in Benghazi, and all those that are responsible, that are going to have to run away, that are trying to run away from anybody ever understanding what went wrong, why it went wrong, how so many of those missiles wound up in the wrong hands, and all those, and the tons of weapons and everything else, and how in fact they've now endangered the people of the United States with their misadventures, and who needs to be prosecuted that isn't. And it just keeps, it's 3 years after the fact, and it keeps rolling around and rolling around. They seem to be totally incompetent in the area of actually protecting us where we need to be protected, and they seem to be absolutely incapable of having their irresponsibility dealt with in or out of government in a way that actually precludes it from happening in the future.
Well, I guess the way to wrap this up is to recognize the fact that we have a lot of our leadership on both sides of the aisle and in the White House that are responsible for a whole lot of our problems internally, and yet nobody is ever brought to account for the problems that our own leadership has created, both sides of the aisle. And I think until Americans actually start prompting and demanding that their leadership take responsibility for all of the problems that they've created, they could have been much more easily and directly solved if we hadn't been into all these games. And I think that's the biggest part of the problem is we now have both an administration and we have a lot of political leaders who are in political leadership who are more into playing games in the world than they are in truly protecting the people of the United States. And I guess from my perspective, I mean, the obvious nature of what's been taking place has been pretty easy to see. Yet we have political leadership all the time that's basically saying, look over there, because they don't want you to see how bad of decisions that they're making.
You know, I'm just a regular Joe citizen. Just in the last 10 years, got involved with politics. But through this process of talking to these politicians and trying to work with them and asking them questions, it's just this game of niceties. And where is the point where you don't have to get angry or cuss them out, but just call it out for what it is. And they don't deserve my respect anymore. I have no respect. What is the calculative point of how many people trust the government and the figures today, Jeff?
Well, those that trust Congress and members of Congress is at an all-time low. I think their approval rating is at less than 8%. The administration maybe at 40%, maybe in the high 30s now at best. And for the first time in the history, I think, or at least in the last 50 to 75 years, even the justice in the Supreme Justice system in the Supreme Court has dropped well below 50% in approval. I think all of our institutions are coming into jeopardy, and they're coming into jeopardy for exactly the reasons that we've listened to going through this analysis of Senator Risch and the CNN interview. Is that we don't trust these people because we can't trust these people because they're no longer serving our needs. They're serving other masters who we don't necessarily know who they are, but we can see directly that they are serving other masters and not the people of the United States. And because of that, they're putting us, the people of the United States, in jeopardy simply to maintain their positions, their pensions, their salaries, and their benefits that they get out of working in government and the power that they obtain from it.
Well, I don't think they understand, like Risch, I don't think he understands how many people are awake. And if there is a disaster or catastrophe on the American people where they could have done something about it, and through their actions, their very actions, they create the deaths of U.S. citizens, don't they understand what kind of liabilities and what history will tell of their tales? Do you think they even possibly have an understanding of this?
Well, I think in large part the problem is that they really don't care because they have the power and the perks. And when you have the power and the perks, what do you care what Joe Blow American really thinks? I think Senator Risch's personal net worth is well north of $50 million. What does he care what you or I or Joe Blow on the street thinks about what is really important for America? He's got his, man, and he's got his position, and I don't think he really gives a flying hoot about what the common man in the United States really goes through and is really worried about and subjected to, and what is most important. No matter what happens, him and the people around him, they're made.
Well, they may think they're made, but so did Hitler. He thought he was made. So did a lot of other tyrants amongst the history of humanity. They had plenty of money. Look at Ceausescu in Romania and what happened with those people when they finally had enough. And they were only operating and getting their information from fax machines. Senator Risch, you need to wake up and smell the roses, because the American people are awake, and we're not, and whether TVOI news survives or not, or whatever happens with us, there's 100 other news agencies reporting on the very same thing. So I think that this insanity needs to cease, and they need to start answering the questions to people like you and I and the hundreds of thousands that are asking it along with us.
Well, I see that you can tell just from what's happened in the fact that so many, virtually none of our questions that we've submitted on these issues and requests for interviews and others has been answered. And I think at this point they truly believe that they're not answerable to the people. What they do is they tell the people what they want them to hear. And if you actually demand that as public servants remember those two words, public servants, that they are responsible in answering to us, the public, that they serve. I think they've reached the point, literally, of an innate or an ingrown royalty that doesn't feel they have to answer to the people, and in fact, it's a nuisance to have to answer to us, and that's why we get so little response, because of all the news agencies in Idaho, TVOI News asks the hardest and the most incisive questions, and you see what happens. We don't get any kind of a response because they don't feel they need to answer the real questions. They only need to answer the fake questions that the docile media, mainstream media, feeds them. Because just watch any of the news programs out there in the mainstream media. They don't ask any of the questions that TVOI News asks, and they don't expect, when they ask the hard questions, they don't demand that they get an answer. Because the political royalty that now exists in this country, all the wealthy, like Risch, they don't feel they have to answer. They're not really beholden to the people.
Well,
and so we've got to turn over. That's why we so desperately need to get people to turn out. I mean, even in the most contentious election, we're still putting 93 to 95% of incumbents right back into office.
well,
And that's why we have to change that.
the game has changed, and one of the most important words that Putin said is talking about these ISIS individuals as paid contractors. They go to the highest bidder, and then he said, "Oh, and by the way, I know how much they're being paid." Putin also said, just before he said that, "I have been silent for a while." It's as crazy as it sounds. The very people that I was trained to fight against, which was the former Soviet Union, he's about ready to release all this dirty laundry. And when the world hears this, Risch is going to be set back on his haunches, and so are the rest of these people, because the world will not forgive them for what they've done. They need to start taking heed to what's going on, because game is about over, Jeff.
Well, it's getting very close. I mean, obviously we're being subjected to a set of autocratic and not democratic rulers, rulers and not democratic representatives. And that's really the problem. They've lost complete touch and sight of who they work for. They consider themselves political royalty, and we're just the peons out here. So they don't have to answer to us.
Well, the thing of it is that the truth is coming out, and they're giving, and that was a warning to this type of actions. The world is fed up with this type of action. They're fed up with the lies. They're fed up with this idiocracy of war on terror and getting down to the bottom of what the truth is. And when the world finds out about just how deep this truth is, all those fortunes and millions and favoritisms will be gone, because they'll start turning each other in.
Yeah, well, it's time they started serving the people again instead of their positions, their perks, and their power.
They have a chance to escape that wrath of the world's knowledge on them right now. They have a very narrow window of time. And people like Risch need to step up to the plate and do the right thing, no matter what the consequences are. And
the question is, will any of them that are currently sitting in Congress and are used to these perks, power, and position, are any of them going to actually step up and address the needs of the American people, or are they going to continue to protect their perks, power, and position?
Well, I'm hoping that this isn't true, that Risch is not involved with any of this problems or criminality or anything else within our government, because I don't think he's that stupid. I think he's a very smart and intelligent man, and I think he knows what's going on in many respects. But right now, maybe he's in a situation where he can't say anything because it compromises himself. If that's the case, then obviously they're going to stand by the lies that are put out. I mean,
what I think we're going to find over time is that the sins of omission are as bad as the sins of commission.
Okay, that's a good way to end this show. The sins of commission to the ends of omission.
Right. The sins of omission are as bad as the sins of commission.
Interesting. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate your time. And folks, please, by all means, check out his book, Citizen's Last Stand. If you really, it's almost like he had a fortune, like a fortune teller in front of you, because the things he talked about years ago have already happened, and it's kind of unnerving in some of it. So I highly encourage you to check that book out. And Jeff, you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to our next interview.
Thank you, Michael, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. You have a good day. Bye.